Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name is Pope. In today's video we are going to be building around the chaotic and unpredictable legendary elemental, the Maelstrom Wanderer. A nameless burden that brings the unknown to the battlefield. For 5 generic, a blue, a red, and a green, Maelstrom Wanderer comes with 7 simple yet extremely potent words. Creatures you control have haste, cascade, and cascade. The cascade ability works as follows. When we cast Maelstrom Wanderer, we're going to exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card with CMC less than Maelstrom Wanderer, so 8. We get to cast that spell for free. Then after that spell resolves, we cascade again. The important properties that come with Maelstrom Wanderer are that you cascade on cast and not on ETB. And then Maelstrom Wanderer gives the newly cascaded creatures and itself the ability to instantly attack. The breakdown of this deck stays true to our commander and is a pure chaos. With each cast, we never know what will come from our deck. The deck focuses on taking chances on not only what we may get to play, but also what our opponents have available. Along with semi-randomized good stuff, we will be stealing spells from our opponents' libraries, stealing permanents from the battlefield, and copying all the stuff that we enjoy along the way. And our budget for this entire deck comes in under $125. But now let's get this show started, taking a look at all the unpredictable spells we're going to be running, starting it off with 3 spells that also have Cascade: Bloodbraid Elf, Ethereum Horn Sorcerer, and Throes of Chaos. Bloodbraid Elf comes down for 4 CMC, lets us cascade into our 3 CMC or lower spells, also a 3/2 body on the field that also has haste. Ethereum Horn Sorcerer, 6 mana, comes down, lets us cascade into 5 or lower, but we can also pay 3, 1 a blue and a red, and return it to our hand to cascade again later. And lastly, Throes of Chaos coming out of Modern Horizons, a very unique card coming out of this set. It simply says cascade, so we're going to cascade into our 3 or lower CMC spells, but then we can use Retrace to cast it again from our graveyard by discarding our lands. This is a great card to stop us from just having dead lands in our hand late game, or if we flood out, we can use Throes of Chaos to help us get to extra spells. Next up, we have 3 enchantments of a chaotic nature: Wild Evocation, Sunbird's Invocation, and Lurking Predators. Wild Evocation for 6 mana says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player reveals a card at random from their hand. If it's a land card, they get to put it on the battlefield, otherwise they get to cast it without paying its mana cost. This goes for everyone around the table and can really cause things to go crazy really quickly, but also we want our opponents to be putting their biggest and best creatures on the field because we have many spells that are going to allow us to steal them and use them for our own. And then we have Sunbird's Invocation, a similar cascade effect, but Sunbird's says we're going to cast a spell and then we get to reveal cards from the top of our library equal to that spell's converted mana cost. Then we can cast one of them for free if it has a CMC less than our first spell we cast. Again, very similar, and it's going to cause us to do all sorts of unknown things just as Cascade would. And then Lurking Predators, a powerful enchantment for 6 mana. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, we get to reveal the top card of our library. If it's a creature card, we get to put it directly onto the battlefield. Otherwise, we can put it onto the bottom of our library. This deck runs a ton of creatures, so Lurking Predator triggers can cause us to get tons of 6-7 CMC creatures straight onto the battlefield, or at the very least, we get to scry. And then what else says random chaos besides flipping some coins? These 4 spells, Mirror March, Fiery Gambit, Stitch in Time, and Squeeze Revenge, all require us to make decisions and flip coins. And here I am again talking about Mirror March, one of my favorite new cards from recent sets. This enchantment is going to let us create tokens of any creature that enters the battlefield on our side. We just have to keep flipping coins and calling it right, and we get that many tokens. This can cause insane ETB effects with all the powerful creatures we have in this deck. And then we have Fiery Gambit, and this card is a doozy, and if you don't go for broke, I don't know what you're doing, but it says flip a coin until you lose a flip or choose to stop flipping. If you lose a flip, Fiery Gambit does nothing, but if you win 1 or more coin flips, Fiery Gambit's going to deal 3 damage to target creature. Then if we win 2 or more flips, Fiery Gambit's going to deal 6 damage to each opponent. And if we can win 3 flips in a row, we get to draw 9 cards and untap all of our lands. Of course, missing a coin flip and doing nothing for 3 mana does kind of stink, but in the instance where you get 1 coin flip right and then 2, everyone is rallying around you, you go for that 3rd one and you hit it, it is just crazy. We're going to do tons of damage, draw out a ton of cards, get to untap all of our lands and just go off. At the very least with Fiery Gambit, you get to have some fun and see just how lucky you can be. Stitch in Time for only 3 mana says we're going to flip a coin, and if we do win that coin flip, we get to take an entire extra turn after this one. Again, spending 3 mana to do nothing does feel bad, but in the chance where we do win the coin flip, we get to take an entire extra turn. And lastly, Squeeze Revenge, a card draw spell for only 3 mana. We get to choose a number, flip a coin that many times or until we lose a flip, and if we do win all of the flips that we chose, we get to draw 2 cards for each flip. I'd like to imagine that if we were only going to go for a 1 coin flip, we would just run Divination and not risk it at all. So with Squeeze Revenge, I'm thinking we're flipping 2 to 3 coins and drawing 4 to 6 cards. And then to round out this section, we have a couple more creatures that bring the RNG traits with them. Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter, and the Combustible Gearhulk. Rashmi, for 4 mana, 2 a green and a blue, says whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than that spell's, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. And if you don't cast the revealed card, you get to draw it. The floor with Rashmi on the board is that we get a free card draw, and the ceiling is we get to cast all sorts of crazy shenanigans for free. And then Combustible Gearhulk for 6 mana, it has First Strike, it's a 6/6, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards, but if they don't, you put the 3 cards off the top of your deck into your graveyard, and then they deal damage equal to their CMC to that opponent. In almost every situation where I have played Combustible Gearhulk, the opponent always lets me draw, fearing that they might get hit for upwards of 18 or 19 damage. But now that we've seen a glimpse of all the madness that is in this deck, let's take a look at all the spells we're going to be using to commandeer our opponent's permanents and manipulate their deck to our benefit. Kicking things off with Blatant Thievery, Molten Primordial, and Diluvian Primordial. Blatant Thievery is a sorcery for 7 mana, so we can cascade into it using Maelstrom Wanderer, and it says for each opponent, we get to just take 1 permanent of theirs. I should make a quick PSA here. Stealing opponents' permanents does not make friends. So if you do use Blatant Thievery or any of the other spells in this deck that let us steal things, just be ready to have some salt coming back your way. But next up we have the 2 Primordials. Molten Primordial, also 7 CMC, so it can trigger off of Maelstrom Wanderer, Haste, and when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent we're going to get to take 1 of their creatures, but just until the end of turn. We get to untap them, they have Haste, and we get to swing out with them. And then Diluvian Primordial, also 7 CMC, has Flying. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, we're going to get to cast 1 target instant or sorcery card from their graveyard without paying the mana cost. Diluvian Primordial can cast anything that is in the graveyard, instant or sorcery, so there's no restrictions, no matter how small or big the CMC is of the instant or sorcery, we get to cast 3 of them for free. Keeping the madness going, we have 3 more chaos-centric spells with Sphinx Ambassador, Chaos Wand, and Knowledge Exploitation. Sphinx Ambassador, 7 CMC, so gonna trigger off our commander. Flying 5/5 that says, whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, we're gonna search that player's library for a card. Then that player gets to name a card. If you selected a creature card that isn't the name that they guessed, you get to put it straight onto the battlefield for free. Digging through another player's deck, finding the biggest and best creatures that they have available, and then playing this little mini game with them is so much fun, and it's just a really unique ability on a unique creature. Chaos Wand going to cost us 3 mana to put on the battlefield. Then we have to pay 4 mana and tap it, but we get to choose an opponent and they're going to exile the top card of their library until they get to an instant or sorcery card. Then we get to cast it without paying its mana cost. While 7 mana to get 1 random spell from an opponent doesn't really sound like a plus EV play, Number one, it's a lot of fun and can do all sorts of crazy things. But number two, if we're able to activate it 2 or 3 times, we are definitely going to see our value coming out of it. And lastly, Knowledge Exploitation, 7 mana again, going to trigger off Wanderer, but it says we get to search a target opponent's library for any instant or sorcery card, and then we get to play it for free without paying its mana cost. Next, we have 3 spells that are going to mess with our opponent's permanents just a little bit more, with Perplexing Chimera, Avarice Totem, and Illicit Auction. Perplexing Chimera, we all know it, we all hate it. For 5 mana, whenever an opponent casts a spell, we can give them Perplexing Chimera and take over that spell. The downside, they now have our Chimera. But the upside is that maybe we don't lose the game. A card that can lead to all sorts of crazy shenanigans. Avarice Totem, for 1 mana, we can play this artifact. Then at any point we can pay 5 and exchange control of Avarice Totem and any target non-land permanent. Avarice Totem absolutely leads to this weird paradigm of mana withholding, but instead of just giving you examples, I'll actually show you a video clip of what it looks like with Avarice Totem on the board real quick. A little bit of Office humor for all the Office fans out there. But next up, we have Illicit Auction, a weird red card for 3 and 2 red. We get to choose a target creature on the board. Then each player is going to bid life for control of that creature. If you cast the spell, you start things off bidding 0. Proceeding in turn order, each player may top the high bid. Then the auction ends when the high bid stands. The highest bidder loses that much life and gains control of that creature. The mind games that come with Illicit Auction, bidding life to most likely take over someone else's commander. You can drive it up to make them lose more. It is just all kinds of crazy. And rounding things out, we have 2 spells that are going to let us play the tops of our opponent's decks with Stolen Strategy and Atali Primal Storm. Stolen Strategy is an enchantment for 5 mana. At the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to exile the top card of each opponent's graveyard. Until the end of the turn, we can cast non-land cards from among those, and we can spend mana as though it were any color. Having an additional 3 cards to cast each turn is a great card advantage and can lead us to having the right answers when we need them. But the only thing that could be better on Stolen Strategy is if we were able to cast them for free, and that is exactly what Atali Primal Storm does. Whenever Atali attacks, not even deals damage, just on attack, so before damage, before blockers, right as he attacks, we're going to exile the top card of each player's library, including our own. Then we can cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way for free. As you can imagine, if we just hit one of our cards, it's most likely going to be a giant spell costing, 7 CMC, and everything after that is just gravy. One swing with Atali can disrupt the entire board state, and depending on what you get, you can take a commanding lead. Casting all the biggest and baddest spells for free is about as good as it gets, so there's only one thing left to do, and that's to start copying them. So let's take a look at how we're going to get that done, kicking things off with 2 enchantments that are going to let us double all of our instants and sorceries, Swarm Intelligence and 1,000 Year Storm. Swarm Intelligence simply says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you can copy it, and we can change the targets if we want. But 1,000 Year Storm, coming out of the latest Ravnica sets, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you not only get to copy it, but you get to copy it for each instant and sorcery spell that you've cast before it this turn. With all of the effects that we have that let us cast so many spells for free, 1,000 Year Storm can lead to us drawing tons of cards, ramping out tons of mana, and maybe even taking tons of additional turns. Maybe the MVP of this entire deck, but at the very least, an absolute bomb. Then we have 2 instances that are going to let us double down, and that's Narset's Reversal and Wild Ricochet. Narset's Reversal, kind of a counter spell. We get to copy target instant or sorcery spell and return it to its owner's hand. Then if we want, we can choose new targets. And Wild Ricochet, we can choose new targets for the first spell, then we get to copy it again. An incredible spell to commandeer ramp, card draw, or possibly even deny removal. Then we have 3 creatures that are going to help us copy or double down on spells that we've been playing. Wildfire Devils comes straight from the most recent Commander products, and whenever it enters the battlefield and at the beginning of our upkeep, so both, we're going to choose a player at random, then that player is going to exile an instant or sorcery card from their graveyard. We get to copy it and cast it without paying its mana cost. In most instances, we might just be getting counter spells or ramp cards, but even that is pretty good considering we are only paying 4 CMC and getting a 4/2 body. Melik is at Paragon, legendary wizard. Play with the top card of our library revealed. We may cast the top card of our library if it's an instant or sorcery, and whenever we cast an instant or sorcery from our library, we get to copy it. Unfortunately, Melik does not work with Wanderer, so cascading will not trigger the duplication, but is still an incredible creature to have on the field, letting us cast our big bombs off the top of our library and then duplicate them. And Clever Impersonator got reprinted in the most recent Commander product, so it's at the cheapest price it's been in quite a while. It says you may have Clever Impersonator enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. So if we or any of our opponents have any amazing enchantments or artifacts on the field that we want to copy, Clever Impersonator can come in and do that, or come in as a creature with a huge ETB effect. And lastly, rounding out the deck, we have a few mana doublers. Zendikar Resurgent, Boundless Realms, and Tempt with Discovery. Zendikar Resurgent, just an amazing card for 7 CMC, so again, coming off of Wanderer. Zendikar Resurgent says whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land can produce, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we also get to draw a card. 2 amazing effects for only 7 CMC, can't beat that. Boundless Realms, another 7-drop, search our library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of lands that we control, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. If we hit Boundless Realms off of our Maelstrom Wanderer, we get to double our entire land base. And lastly, Tempt with Discovery, we get to search our library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, then each opponent can do the same, and for each opponent that does, we get to go get another land as well. I wanted to add this section here at the end because it is very important that we have either some sort of accelerant or additional land drops, because Maelstrom Wanderer is not cheap. At 8 mana, if he gets removed 1 time, it's 10 mana to get him back out. So we need to make sure that we have the resources available to be able to cast him over and over again. But now that we've seen the headliners of this ever curious deck, let's take a look at everything else that's inside the 99. When it comes to removal and control in this deck, we have 6 to 7 targeted spells or abilities that are going to let us either destroy stuff on the board or take it for our own. And then we have about 4 to 5 board wipes or bounce effects. Our card advantage in this deck is unprecedented. It is through the roof, going to let us draw tons and tons of cards, but even better, we're going to be casting tons of spells for free. Our ramp package in this deck is a little bit excessive given that Maelstrom Wanderer is an 8 CMC commander. We've got 5 mana rocks, about 6 additional green ramp spells, and then 2 to 3 creatures that are going to help us get to that threshold of mana that we're going to need to really go off. And then how are we going to win with this deck? Well, about the only thing we're really going to focus on is outvaluing our opponents. We're going to try to cast tons of spells, most of them for free, copy it when we can, and cast the biggest, best things. But the true matter about this deck is that it is a chaos deck. Our focus is to do all sorts of crazy things, cast big, wacky spells, and keep the game in a very disorganized but still fun state of play. But that is going to do it for this chaotic and neutral deck tech. Maelstrom Wanderer brings with him the possibility to do things that no deck should be allowed to do. Chaos themed decks can be built to achieve many different goals, but for this deck I really wanted to keep the focus on playing the biggest and flashiest spells that we could, that will get the playgroup excited and leave everyone feeling like they had a good time being against us as an opponent. If you enjoyed this deck tech, let us know by hitting that like button, and if you want to know when our next video goes live, then make sure to subscribe. A new Commander deck tech will be posted here every Friday at 9 AM Central. If you're a Twitter user, head on over there, shoot us a follow at EDH Tactics. Thanks again for all of you who continue to enjoy our content by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys for the next one.